Hello, I'm Kurma and welcome. In this series, we're going to show you how to cook a wide variety of international vegetarian cuisine from over 30 countries. And in this edition, we're going to show you how to prepare a Mediterranean-style buffet consisting of Italian tomato and eggplant appetizer, Spanish vegetable rice, paella, and spinach filo triangles, spanakopita. So, let's begin. We're making a delicious combination of eggplants and tomatoes today, which is very, very succulent and which can be served with different things like pizzetti or crostini, little bits of sliced crusty bread, something to start off a meal. Let's have a look at our delicious ingredients for our antipasto di melanzane, which is a dish from Naples. Over here we've got a bowl of tomatoes, which I blanched and I've chopped up. I've taken out all the pips. There's 3 tomatoes there. And on our platter over here we have 2 very handsome looking eggplants. We have a cup of safflower oil, a quarter of a cup of olive oil, a quarter of a teaspoon of yellow asafoetida powder. This is my addition to the recipe. We've got a tablespoon of tomato paste, triplo concentrato di pomodoro, as it's known, half a cup of water. We've got a teaspoon of salt and half of a teaspoon of freshly ground black peppercorns. So let's begin by firing up a couple of pots over here we've got on the stove. We're going to be frying our eggplants, and at the same time we're going to be cooking our sauce. And before we actually chop our eggplants up, let's get things happening. What I might do is, over here, fry our eggplant. So this is where I'm going to add my safflower oil. We're going to be frying our little chunks of eggplant in here, like so. There's our oil. Now over here in this pan, let's add our olive oil for our sauce. Lovely golden olive oil. Let's pop in our yellow asafoetida powder here. Gives a lovely, fragrant kick to the sauce. Let's put in our tomato. Saute it up for a second or two. Let's add our water and our tomato paste, like so. Let's stir it all in. I'm going to let my sauce cook down for about 10 minutes. All this is going to be seasoned with now is a little bit of salt and pepper. So while our sauce is cooking down, I can keep my eye on it, and our oil is heating up. Let's cut up our eggplants in a special way here for this lovely appetizer. These are quite large eggplants. I might end up only using 1.5 of these. But the first thing we're going to do anyway is to cut off our little end here, like so. Pop him aside. Now we're going to cut this into 1/4 inch slices, like so. It's important to cut this just right so your dish looks very attractive. The sharp knife is in order here. Okay, let's stack all these up together and let's cut these into 1/4 inch strips. Like so. Now let's cut them all this way into maybe 1.5, 2-inch lengths. Okay, now we have all our little bits of eggplant nicely cut. It's amazing when you cut eggplants up how they expand in size. Of course, when you fry them, they shrink a little bit. Let's go over to our oil here and have a look. I think it's looking like it's just about ready to fry. There's a little haze over the top. Let's take a handful of eggplant pieces and pop them in, shall we? Now what we're going to do at this stage is fry them with practically no stirring around at all. Our sauce looks like it's in a very healthy condition. So I think it's time to add our salt, our black pepper, stir all that in, and turn off the flame. And let's swing over to our eggplants here and have a look at those. Well, they're looking beautiful too. Well, out they come. If you're going to prepare this eggplant and tomato appetizer for your guests, I suggest you make it pretty close to when the guests come. It has that lovely fresh flavour. The beauty about cooking in oil, of course, is you can serve it cold and it doesn't all congeal like with butter. And so it can be served warm or it can be served cold equally well. So what we're going to do now is to very gently combine our eggplants with our sauce, and then we'll be ready to go. Pop our eggplant pieces in here, like so. One more to go. Let's fold all this in very, very gently so we don't crush up our little pieces of eggplant. Wonderful aroma here. This is really, truly a delightful dish. That's as far as I'm going to fold it in. Let's take this over to our area here. This is really sumptuous. I'm going to keep plenty of this on hand. A delicious batch of antipasto de melanzane. Delicious eggplant and tomato appetizer. Stand back for the rush. You know, one of the most famous rices of the Mediterranean area is paella, a beautiful rice dish from Spain. It's practically Spain's national dish. I'm going to show you now how to make a vegetarian version of paella with all sorts of wonderful, colourful ingredients. Let me show you them over here. We've got some nice, rich, green vegetable stock here, 2½ cups. We've got 4 large tomatoes that were cut up into little cubes after they were peeled. We've got ½ cup of nice virgin Spanish olive oil. We've got a cup of green beans cut up into 1-inch pieces. We've got 1 large red pepper that's been diced, ½ cup of shredded almonds. We've got 18 black olives that have been cut in half. They've had their stones removed. We've got a stalk of celery that's been chopped up into little pieces, 3/4 cup of fresh green peas, 2 teaspoons of salt. We've got ½ teaspoon of yellow asafoetida powder, a teaspoon of ground up black peppercorns, ½ teaspoon of Spanish saffron threads, and 2 cups of basmati rice here. Saffron is the dried stigma of this Spanish crocus plant. When these plants are hand-picked early in the morning when the dew is still on them, it takes 210,000 of these little stigmas to make 1 pound of saffron, which is currently selling for about $2,000 a pound. Saffron has a pleasantly bitter, semi-spicy, honey-like fragrance, and it adds a beautiful yellow colour to all your dishes. In fact, there's an active colouring agent in there called croquin, which can colour up to 150,000 times its own weight. Unmistakable yellow colour. It's quite an amazing substance. And we're going to grind that up now in our mortar and pestle with a little bit of warm water. In fact, about 2 tablespoons. There we go. Now let's grind up our saffron with our heavy machinery here. Quite an amazing colour. So, next thing on our agenda is to boil the water for our rice. Actually, we're using vegetable stock. Gives it a lovely, tasty flavour. We've got our little pot over here. We're going to slip our water into our pot along with our salt, and we're going to put that on a little boil while we toast up our rice in our other pot. So there we are, vegetable stock and salt. So in our large pan here, we're going to start by popping on our lovely virgin Spanish olive oil. Glorious colour. Let's saute our asafoetida in there, shall we? Full savoury flavour. Just cook it up for a second or two until the fragrance of the asafoetida comes out. Let's put in our diced red pepper now, shall we? And saute it up for a minute or two. This is such a colourful rice. It'll have your guests asking you for the recipe without fail. Let's add our rice to our peppers now. Saute it up there with our red peppers. Lovely fragrance. I'm going to saute my basmati rice here for about 2 minutes. Our rice is looking great. Let's add our vegetable stock and all the other lovely ingredients, shall we? Here comes our lovely boiling vegetable stock. followed close behind by a succession of other lovely things. Our green beans. These nuts are going later. Black olives. We've got our lovely celery pieces here. How delightful. We've got our green peas. Black pepper, give it a bit of a stir. Tomatoes. And of course, how could I forget, our saffron water. Well, that is smelling absolutely fabulous. So let's bring our rice here to a full boil and then turn it down to a tiny simmer. In that way, we can pop the lid on very tightly and it'll cook very slowly for half an hour. And all those grains will puff up and become lovely and fragrant, and all those delicious vegetables will be steaming on top. Have a look here. Put a lid on top and leave it very securely for half an hour. While that's all cooking, I'm going to not disturb it. I'm going to clean up the kitchen here. Why don't you join me in half an hour? Well, time's up for our rice. It's time for the grand opening here. Let's give it a bash. Ooh, look at that rice. It's looking quite magnificent. Let's grab our chopstick here and have a gentle dig around in there and see what we can see. Well, all the vegetables, of course, are done, and let's take a few of those lovely grains of rice and have a pinch of them. They're beautifully soft. Because we're using basmati rice, the rice has remained fully plump and it hasn't broken up. Very important for a visually attractive rice. Those rice grains stay nice and separate. Now we've got our closest version of a Spanish paella dish here. This is what I could find, but I think it does the trick. This rice will look very, very gorgeous served in this pan with a sprinkle of lovely little things. Let's get it in there, shall we? I'm going to start serving it from the bottom and make sure all the lovely vegetables on top present it in a very, very lovely way. Last but not least, we're going to sprinkle a lovely batch of almond slivers. And there we have a wonderful, wonderful Spanish paella. I'm going to show you now how to make a couple of delightful Greek dishes. The first of which is a famous Greek savoury item called spanakopita. For those of you who are familiar with Greek cooking, I'm sure you've heard of it. Delicious phyllo pastry stuffed with spinach and traditional strong-tasting white salty sheep's cheese called feta. A great favourite of mine also. Let's have a look at the ingredients for this lovely dish. We've got 13 ounces, that's about 375 grams of phyllo pastry here, all wrapped up, ready to go. We've got, in our big bowl here, 2 very large bunches of spinach that have been washed very, very thoroughly and coarsely chopped. And over here on our platter, we've got 5 tablespoons of butter divided up into 2. 3 tablespoons here and 2 tablespoons of butter here. We're going to use them separately. We've got a teaspoon of nice, fresh, cracked black pepper, a teaspoon of yellow asafoetida powder. This is my addition to this very famous recipe. 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, 2 tablespoons of plain flour. We've got 2 tablespoons of soft breadcrumbs, that's optional. We've got 9 ounces, that's 250 grams of chopped feta cheese. We've got 3/4 cup of milk, and over in the pot we have a cup of melted butter to brush on top. So this recipe is divided into 2. The preparation of the pastry into little strips for rolling up, and our filling. So the first thing we're going to do here is to melt our butter in our large pan over here. We've got our 3 tablespoons of butter that's going in along with our salt and our pepper and our spinach. But first of all, let's melt this little blob of butter. Let's add our salt and our pepper and our spinach. I might pop my spinach in first, actually, like so. And this is going to be cooked down a little bit and then folded in with our feta cheese. Often when you wash spinach, you'll notice a lot of water gets mixed up with the leaves there. Make sure there's not too much water goes in here. This filling should be quite dry. I have got some optional breadcrumbs that I'm going to pop in just in case the whole mixture is a little too wet. Otherwise it's a bit hard to use. Let's pop in our salt and pepper at this point in time. Actually, there's no salt in this just today, just pepper. The feta cheese is salty enough. Now I'm going to pop a lid on here and just allow it to steam up a little bit and then carry on with my preparation. While I'm doing that, I'm going to be preparing a white sauce. This white sauce is made basically from milk, butter and a little flour and a little bit of yellow asafoetida powder, my addition to this recipe, and some lovely nutmeg. Nutmeg and spinach go wonderfully together. I always use them in conjunction with each other. I'm going to make a little bit of a white sauce in this small pan here, and I'm going to fold that in to the finished spinach. So let's make sure there's no water in our pan. And let's pop a little bit of butter, the other 2 tablespoons out of the 5 tablespoons of butter in our pan here. Let's melt it, and then when it's completely melted, we're going to saute our asafoetida and nutmeg, and then pop the flour in. Now this can all be done a little bit in advance so that your filling can be quite cool when you prepare your filo pastry. While we're waiting for this butter to melt, let's maybe not waste any time, let's quickly unwrap our packet of filo pastry. This pastry is extremely popular in all sorts of Middle Eastern, Mediterranean type cuisines. It used to be made homemade at home by all sorts of Mediterranean type people, but these days it's more convenient to purchase it in the shops. It isn't such an easy thing to make, and you can get some very nice varieties of filo pastry. The important thing about filo pastry is that you keep it in the fridge until you need it, and that means very, very close to when you're actually going to use it for the preparation. Let's take our plastic sheet from underneath here, and as a precaution I'm going to keep this very cool and dry. I've got a very cool, wrung out, slightly damp tea towel that I'm going to put on top of here just to keep it from becoming dry, because if your filo pastry dries out, it's very, very hard to use. So that's all ready to go. Now our butter's melted over here, have a look. We're going to add our other ingredients for our white sauce here now. Starting with our asafoetida powder. Let's saute that up for the lovely savoury, almost onion garlic type flavour, like so. Some nutmeg, some plain flour, let's whisk this up a little bit, like so, just for a second or two. Let's add our milk, which by the way was warmed up before. It's still a little bit warm. So we're going to stir our white sauce here till it thickens, and then we're going to add it to the rest of our ingredients. Oh, our spinach is probably looking quite nice at this point. Certainly steaming here, it's almost fogging up my glasses. Have a look. Amazing how it's shrunk so much, huh? Generally spinach reduces itself by about 16 times. And what we're trying to do here, and we're doing a good job, is drive off all the water. As you can see, there's practically no liquid left in there. That's the best consistency for your spinach and cheese filling. So another few seconds there, and it should be nice and dry. We've got our optional breadcrumbs just in case it's a little moist. And our white sauce is finished. Let's turn off the flame. Yeah. See? Isn't that nice? Right, so I think I'll turn my spinach off at this point also. And we're going to mix all this up in our large bowl here. Let's empty out our spinach water, like so. Take a paper towel, dry it out, and pop our spinach into the bowl. Lovely flavoursome spinach. It's important that you chop it first. It makes it a lot easier. Otherwise, chopping hot spinach is a little difficult. Now into there, we're going to add our feta. Lovely, strong smelling feta. I'm just going to break up the feta cheese here a little bit before I mix it in with the spinach. Otherwise, somebody will bite into a huge big chunk of feta. I wouldn't mind personally. I think it's got a great flavour. It is quite strong. If only you were here now to smell the aroma of this cheese. It's quite phenomenal. This is a particularly good batch of feta. Let's fold all that in, like so. Right, now let's add our white sauce. There we go. Let's fold all this in together. This is smelling divine. And let's pop in our breadcrumbs. I think we need them today. Well, there it is, our spanakopita filling. And wonderful batch of spinach pie filling it is indeed. Well, let's pop that in the fridge. And while we cool that down, let's work on our pastry here, shall we? Let's clean the decks here a bit. Unveil our filo pastry, which has been patiently waiting. Now we go. So, first thing we're going to do is measure our filo pastry here to get the right size strips. This is very important. I like to make strips of pastry about 4 inches wide. That's about 10 centimetres. Let's mark a spot there. Let's mark another spot there. So we'll cut off this amount of pastry, like so. This is a bit less than 4 inches. We don't need that. I think I can use that for something later on, so I won't waste it. Pop it aside. Now, let's cut this as evenly as we can, and we've got our lovely strips for our spinach triangles. Good sharp knife here is in order. This stuff cuts wonderfully as long as you have a sharp knife. There we go. So here's our lovely strips. Let's stack these on top of each other like so, very carefully. And let's slide them off the board. Let's take 2 strips of pastry. Put that one there. And let's get another one, like so. Sometimes they stick together fiddly. Okay, here we go. Strip number 2. Place them down here on the board. Now we're going to butter them. We're going to fill them with filling. Let's grab our butter from over here, which is still quite warm. Let's pop it over here in an accessible spot. You're going to use a pastry brush for this. This is a must. Now what I think I might do at this stage, so our pastry doesn't dry out, our pastry at the back there, that's going to be waiting as we need it, I'm going to cover up to keep nice and moist. And I'm going to get my filling from the fridge, which is probably sufficiently cooled down by now. Lovely cool fridge. Pop that there. It's important to get yourself organised when you're making spinach triangles. So we've got our filling, we've got our butter, we've got our filo. One other thing you'll need is something to bake in the oven. This is like a cookie sheet, and it should be unbuttered, ungreased. It doesn't have to have anything on it. That should be nearby. This recipe makes about 24 of these lovely little triangles. Okay, let's grab our butter and butter away. We're going to butter 2 strips at a time, and then we're going to load them up with lovely spinach and feta cheese filling for this mouth-watering Greek savoury spanakopita. There's 1 strip. And here comes strip number 2. Right. Now let's stack our 2 strips of pastry on top of each other. Lift up the back piece here. Let's pop him on top of the front piece like so. Here's our 2 strips. Now take a spoon, place a teaspoon, or a heaped teaspoon actually would be nice, in the corner of your 2 strips. Look at this very carefully. And then lift up these 2 strips like so and fold them over to form a triangle. Now take this triangle and fold it over like this. And again, and again, and again, and again, and finally add here this little piece with a piece of butter and stick it on with the butter. Well, here we are, the last of our lovely spanakopitakias. Must admit I made these in record time today. I've made a few thousand of these things over the years, I think. But there's a very handsome batch 24 lovely spanakopitakias, spinach and phyllo triangles. Well, our oven is preset at 180 degrees centigrade, that's 355 Fahrenheit, nice and hot. We're going to pop them in there for about 20 or 30 minutes, but you do have to keep an eye on them just in case they brown quickly. Some of them cook quicker than others. So be close on hand when you bake your phyllo triangles. Let's have a look at our, beautiful spinach phyllo triangles. Looking magnificent. Spanakopita. Aren't they nice? Delicious golden puffs of phyllo pastry stuffed with succulent spinach and feta cheese. Spinach phyllo triangles. Spanakopita. Well, that's it for this edition of Cooking with Kurma. I do hope you'll enjoy preparing these dishes as much as I've enjoyed sharing them with you. Happy and healthy eating.